We're going to get started. I am John Dersch. I'm giving the talk today on 100 years of mathematics at the college, and I'm not really sure what I'm going to do. I have been working on this for quite a while. I actually started working on this 14 years ago and then got sidetracked till about a year and a half ago and then started up again. Looking at the wealth of knowledge that we have in this room, Misty, it's good to see you. You thought you'd sneak in? Okay.
She'll always be part of our meeting.
Yes, yes. We have Heather, by the way, Heather Cook sends her regrets. She couldn't make it. Misty, on the other hand, she just showed up. Yeah. We have a wealth of knowledge in here sitting before me, and so I'm going to go through some things I've prepared, but I would encourage you, and I really mean this, if you've got questions, comments, observations, corrections to make, great. I'd just as soon talk about those, and we can go in any direction you want. I know quite a bit about a few things. I don't know, there are many questions that you can ask me that I will not know the answer to, and that's fine, because a lot of times those are the best questions because that gives me more to think about. If you arrived late, you can still take a cookie. Hi, Dana. So, okay, this is where it began. If you've been on Fountain Street in the last 100 years, you recognize that building. That is Central High School. We were on the top floor. This particular photograph is from the 1925 yearbook, and one way you know what the photographs from the 20s is right there. You've got the World War I memorial. So the picture was taken sometime in the early to mid-20s. Started in 1914. We were essentially University of Michigan, West Branch, first 2 years. Although when we started, we were just a one-year college, because you can't really have a second year of college if nobody's been there yet. First 2 years, we were one-year college, and we pretty much followed University of Michigan's curriculum as closely as possible. We used their texts, we used their course numbers, we followed their course outlines. We did not necessarily follow what they charged for tuition. In 1914, if you were a state resident of Michigan, you could go to U of M for $42. That's a year. It was $60 to go to JC. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Hey, you know, we've always been, the best place to go, right? So you have to charge a little bit more for something like that. Faculty we were part of Grand Rapids Public Schools then. In fact, we were part of Grand Rapids Public Schools till 1991. And because of that, the faculty at the time were essentially high school teachers, specifically chosen because of their expertise in certain fields. And most of them came right from Central High School, which obviously makes sense. You're teaching at the college there. Well, it's nice to have classes there as well. This is where we moved to a few years later. This is a picture from 1928. This was our home from 1925 to 1944. What happened in the early goings of the college is that things were kind of tough. Enrollment was down. In fact, there was some discussion that perhaps we'd have to not even keep the junior college going, because in 1916, we started in 1914 with 49 students. I actually have a listing of students which lists 48, and I have another count which says 42, but I think 49 is the official number, so we'll go with that. Okay. The next year, 1915, we started with 36, and by winter semester of 1916, we had 22 students. That's it. And there was discussion that perhaps that this laudable goal of having a junior college was not going to take root. I got some stuff here that if I remember, I'll actually take a look at. This is School Survey, Grand Rapids, Michigan, 1916. This has a survey of pretty much everything that was happening in the school system back in those days. And I'm going to read you a small excerpt here. The junior college in Grand Rapids is in very grave danger of dying a premature death. This is April 1916. And I mentioned the number of students had gone from 49 to 22. in physics, and by the way, thank you, Dr. Johnson, for representing physics. Physics has been incredibly helpful to me over my entire career here, but in particular for this presentation, because physics never throws anything away. Physics has stuff that the archives would like to have. Physics has this. Now, this is a copy of all of the grades received by physics students taking college-level physics courses from 1914 to 1980. It's a copy. They've got the original. And the reason I mention that is in the first 7 years of this college, there were a grand total of 8 A grades. Total. So I'm going to blame physics for the fact that the college didn't do very well at first because it was so tough to get through. But apparently math wasn't doing too well either because, let's see, what's it say here? Mathematics, currently enrolled, this is April 1916, 7. We had 7 math students at the college in 1916. But in the previous semester, we had 12. So things weren't going well. And then there is this marvelous quote. When we consider that as the work is organized in Grand Rapids, the regular teachers of the high school are given charge of the work in the junior college and therefore excused from 2 class periods in the high school for each class period which is carried on in the junior college, it is again perfectly apparent that for economic reasons we demand that class sections shall not be unduly small. So enrollment has been an issue here for about 98 years. So enrollment was down quite a bit. But then in 1916, we added the second year of college. We lowered our tuition from $60 to $40 a year. $40 a year. And then we also started an engineering program, and our enrollment went up considerably. So that by 1924, there was actually a statement made in the college yearbook which said, "Hush, little college, don't you cry. You'll get a bigger building by and by." And this is it. Now, this was Strong Junior High School, built in 1891. If you look carefully, right there, you see that building right there? You know what building that is? That's the music building. Now, then it was the gymnasium. How many of you were students here now or in the past? How many of you were students here? How many of you were students here long enough ago to know when that was the gymnasium? Okay, yeah, it was. In fact, it didn't become the music building until I think around 1980. Chesla and I were talking about when they tore this building down, and we're thinking mid to late 60s, because you said you didn't remember it when you were here? Yeah, so torn down. This building has the music building to its left, and somewhere behind where the current ATC is, you know, the red part of the ATC, the part that goes back towards the east, we're thinking that's where the engineering building was. We actually had an engineering building in those days. But when I say we, I don't know, Walt, did you and I talk about that at all?
Yeah, in fact, we found a picture of it.
Okay.
It's directly behind this end of the building.
Okay, so it's basically what you're saying is it's over here but behind it?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Well, that's a little further north than I figured, but that's good. I need to see a picture of that. I thought maybe I found a picture, but I wasn't sure, so I didn't include it. We had an engineering building. This was our home until 1944. There was a war going on in the early to mid-40s, and that had a tremendous effect on our enrollment. Our enrollment was going up in the 20s. The Depression hit, enrollment went down. The Depression began to improve, enrollment went up. World War II came, enrollment really went down, especially male population, and because they were going to war. And there was some talk about, you know, are we going to be able to keep the junior college open? And as I recall, Marina Sweats, some of you remember Dean Sweats, related this story to me that there was discussion about what was going to happen to Davis Tech and the junior college. Davis Technical School is where Marina graduated from, high school, about 1942. And do we keep, the public school system is essentially saying, do we keep Davis Tech open or do we keep the college open? And they thought, well, you know, we think we're going to win the war. It'd be better to have the college. So in 1944, we moved from here to a building you'll recognize. Now, I had to include this picture mainly for one reason. Look at the parking. Now, I know our students complain about parking, but if you're parked right there, when are you going to leave? I really am amazed at that photograph, and so even though it's not a very good photo, I included it anyway. It's just, yeah, that's amazing, amazing. The building to the right in the foreground there was an apartment building. There were about 6 families living there, so I don't think that was all of their cars. I think that's probably student parking, although talking to people who were here in the 50s and 60s, faculty parked on the street with everyone else. Let's see. Okay, now you're probably not going to be able to read some of that. It is, you might be able to if your eyes are better than mine. This is from the original 1914 catalog. It's actually a copy of a copy, and I thank physics for that again because they had the copy from which I made mine. These were cut off. I have no idea when this copy was made. 1914 catalogs are very rare. They wouldn't have printed very many of them. So, okay, the 7 founding disciplines. Rhetoric and composition. Probably refer to that as English. You'll be happy to know that in the teens and the 20s, if you were going to major in engineering, you took 2 semesters of rhetoric. You did. Mathematics is second. History, biology, physics, Latin, and German. Tom, there's no chemistry. What's up with that? I'm sure it was added closely thereafter. I will read you the top here because I mentioned something about our ties to the University of Michigan. The subjects offered in the junior college will be those of the regular literary department of the University of Michigan. The teachers of these subjects will follow the outlines of each course in cooperation with the professors at the university. And then down at the bottom, admission to the junior college will be secured upon the same basis as that of the University of Michigan. If you wanted to get in here in 1914, 1916, into the 20s and 30s, further than that even, if you can go here, you can go to U of M. Those are the standards. Now, this is a math seminar, sort of. It's a talk about what's happened here in mathematics. I thought that at this point, I kind of have 2 broad areas. What kinds of courses have we had? Carol, you come in here. It's fine. Please, come on. It's all right. Here, you can stand here and do this if you want. We'll look at math courses, and then we'll look at math instructors. The courses I could talk about for a couple of days, and then I'd end up standing here by myself because a lot of it's not particularly interesting. So I'll go through this rather quickly. If you have anything you want to ask about, wonder about, comment on, please let me know. And then we'll talk a little bit about some faculty. We'll start with algebra. Well, now we get to see who's awake, or at least who knows their basic math. I'm disappointed in myself because this is not a typo. This was something I found in a textbook used at the college, signed by a junior college student. I know that for a fact because I bought the book at a local bookstore, Redux Books. I don't know if I should give him a plug or not. The owner is such a jerk. But I'm on YouTube now, right? Clarence, I hope everyone comes to Redux Books. I got this book at Redux, and I'm looking through it, and I see this name, and it's clearly a student's name, and I've got quite a few student yearbooks. So I look in there, and sure enough, I find him. So it was a GRJC student, and next to some problem where I think you had to do implicit differentiation in student handwriting, there's this. So algebra problems have been with us forever. Algebra is really the foundational course for us. We've always had algebra at the college. The first course we offered was essentially college algebra. Let me back up a second here. Where it says mathematics, it says college algebra and geometry, 4 credits, Mr. Wilcox. I'm not quite sure if that's correct or if that's a typo and it was supposed to be college algebra and analytic geometry, and I have no way of verifying that because I have nothing else which tells me what happened back in 1914 except what you're looking at. Because if you go 3 years ahead, you had what would have eventually become Math 110, which was called college algebra and analytic geometry. It was called Math 1E. Back, well, let's see, not that far back actually. Prior to 1960, calculus was not a freshman level course. Calculus was a sophomore level course. And that wasn't just us. That was most of the country. I mean, there were a few elite schools out east that in the teens and 20s they had their freshmen taking calculus, but they were the exceptions. University of Michigan, calculus was a sophomore level course till after World War II. So you began your college career with college level courses taking college algebra and analytic geometry. And I have a couple of books that were used in those days, and they're pretty intense. And the analytic geometry part, to be perfectly honest, I'm very envious of being able to teach calculus to students who would have known that analytic geometry. Because we're talking about a couple of chapters on conic sections, including rotation of axes, which I taught once or twice, and that's rough sledding. And in Calc 3 right now, we do graphing surfaces in 3D, quadratic surfaces and all that, planes, lines, finding equations of lines, equations of planes. They did all that in this college algebra and analytic geometry. There were actually, there's a two-course sequence, 1E and 2E. That particular lineage that I've got there may or may not be correct. That's a long story. I will simply say that the registrar's office believes that what I have right there, Math 3, 13, 123, 110, the registrar's office believes that's true. The catalogs suggest that it's true, but Dick Chestnut, okay, how many of you knew Dick Chestnut? How many of you had Dick Chestnut as a student? Yes. Dick started here in 1958, and I corresponded with Dick quite a bit after he retired. He was kind enough to send me several letters. They're great, they really are. And explain some things, and he says that what I've got up there is not true. That he created Math 110 on his own because there was a need for it due to the fact that when they split calculus away from analytic geometry, there was no proper prerequisite course, and so he made Math 110 for that reason. Tom, do you remember anything about that? I know you weren't here that early, but Dick talking about it? Okay. So anyway, that's kind of interesting, and I may never get that one resolved. Now, as time went on, it became apparent that we needed math courses that maybe were not quite as rigorous, and so in 1932, there was this course called Math X. That's what it was called. It had no title. The very brief descriptions that the catalogs contained at those times said something to the effect of algebra and trig. It had both. It was a 4-credit course. It had both. And it was designed for pre-med and pre-dental students. And then about 3 or 4 years later, they added forestry. So Math 107, the ancestor of that, was for pre-dent, pre-med, and forestry students. Got the number 7 in 1936, became 107 in 1962, which suggests college level. That gets interesting because if you look at when the course descriptions got a little more amplified, Math 7, its name was School Algebra and Trig, and then it became even more clear around 1960. They called it High School Algebra and Trig, and then in 1962 it got a 1 in front of it, and then it said something like transferability depends on the transfer institution. Trig disappeared from it in 1964, and at that time it became a 3-credit course, and then we made it a 4-credit course when we introduced graphing calculators, I think in 96. Okay. Math 098 began in 1945. Math 098 was Algebra 1. HSA stands for High School Algebra. That is what it was called. It had no number. It was not called Math, no number. It was Math 098 High School Algebra. Why do you think that course was developed in 1945? World War II. The GI Bill was in full swing. We had returning vets. I mean, by the time fall of 45 came around, the war was all but over. And, well, I guess actually, when classes started, it was over. Okay. But the planning for it would have begun sooner than that, and it was clear that there were returning GIs who weren't quite ready for the rigors of intermediate or college algebra, and so that is where Math 098 began. I was at a conference a few days ago where the person giving the opening address asked, when did developmental education begin in this country? And the answer she gave was it began in the 70s. My answer was right after World War II, because you really needed things like that. That course has been with us ever since. It's changed numbers a few times. In fall of 85, it became 104, which again is kind of now all of a sudden it's college level. And it did say in the catalog, transferability determined by transfer institutions. But in the years prior to 1985 and after 2011, it's always been considered developmental. And then continuing the trend towards offering courses at a slightly lower level, we had Math 003 began in 1976 as arithmetic for college students. This is being taped, so I'm going to be careful how I word this. Ron Schassberger, okay. How many of you knew Ron? How many of you had Ron? Okay. Ron and I talked quite a bit about a variety of things. Ron was a good guy. He's no longer with us, which is too bad. I asked him about Math 003, and he said, oh yeah, I created that in 1976 because nursing students came to me and said, our nursing students don't know any math. Can you help us? He said, sure. He created this course. Someone at the college, and I might know who it is, but I'm not going to say. Someone at the college said, this is perfect for what we need for the college, and essentially said, we're not going to call it arithmetic for college students, we're going to call it mathematics for college students, and it's not going to just be for nursing. And Ron developed this course. He never taught it because he was annoyed. So the year after this, it was called Mathematics for College Students, and then it's pretty much stayed the same, although in 2009, Shanna Goff led the effort to change this from a one-time course to splitting it up into 0956 for people who need a little more time, and then 097 is basically what 003 used to be. Any questions on any of that? Okay, trigonometry, and again, I'm not really expecting you to read that. You might be able to. People in the front row are lucky here. Tom Post is looking at that, and you're having wonderful thoughts now, aren't you, Tom? This is from a trigonometry text that used to be in the Grand Rapids Community College library, and every once in a while they have sales where they want to get rid of books that for some reason they don't want to keep anymore. This was one of them. I bought this for $1 20 years ago, and I can't understand why they wanted to get rid of it. This is from 1916, and I need to be moving on here. I don't want to dwell on this, but the first part of this is, for those of you familiar with trig, this is an angle-angle side problem. You use loss signs to solve this. And all of our students who've had trig should be very comfortable with all of this. This is all logarithms. Keep asking you to raise your hands. How many of you have actually solved problems like this using logarithms? Did you enjoy it? Betsy, you enjoyed it? We need to talk later. I actually taught this a couple times. Once at Michigan State and once, might have been here when I was an adjunct. No one liked doing that stuff. It was brutal. You had to look up numbers in a log table. But Shanna came by and saw this earlier, and I'm not going to go into detail here, but there's some really interesting stuff here if you've never worked with logs. I'll just mention this one. It says log of sine beta. Okay, now sine beta. Sine beta is between -1 and 1. Okay? And if it's in a right triangle, it's got to be between 0 and 1. Well, the sine of beta, since it's the sine of a number between 0 and 1, has to be smaller than 1. So the logarithm of that has to be what kind of number? Negative number. So it says right there, log sine beta 9.88948, which is not a negative number. Do you remember doing stuff like that?
In high school.
Yeah. There were reasons for all of that, but you'll just have to check with me later on what's going on. Or maybe you remember, or maybe, you know what I ought to do? I'm looking at someone from my Calc 3 class. You know what I ought to do here? I ought to take this problem and give it to my Calc 3 class and say, explain all this. Extra credit? The lineage for trig is pretty easy. It didn't change much over the years. Started in 1922 as a separate course here. Had a lot of different numbers. It finally became 3 credits just this semester. It's been a 2-credit course for 99 years. Oh no, I'm sorry, 1922. A long time, and finally became a 3-credit course. I do need to mention though that logarithms were always listed as part of that course until 1999. We're still in the catalog. Now, those of you who were teaching here in 1999, did you use logarithms when you taught trig? Tom? Okay. I think Tom was the one who wanted to keep them in. Calculators made logarithms obsolete in the sense that they were used in this course. Catalogs tend to retain information that can become out of date. And the catalogs at the college are wonderful, but as I think I'll mention 1 or 2 more times, they sometimes have dubious information. Okay, calculus, I want you all to look at that. That is, I collect books. Those of you who've been in my office know that. That is, in my mind, the most beautiful title page ever in any book I have ever seen. Okay? Okay. I brought it with me because I wanted you to know that, yes, indeed, it's from the real thing. Here is the entire junior college catalog, 1943, 1944. Thanks again to physics. And there it is. They put an integral sign on the title page, which is really, really ironic, because from 1943 to 1945, we didn't offer any calculus. It's a math talk, right? So I have to draw one graph. It's part of the contract. If we graph number of calc students versus year. So let's make this 1917. That was the first year we had calc. Okay, so, and this is qualitative. This is not very quantitative because I don't know numbers very well till probably the 60s. Okay, so enrollment went up, calc enrollment went up, calc enrollment went back down, calc enrollment went up, calc enrollment went up, calc enrollment dropped like a stone and then was 0, and then it went nuts. And then it came back down, and then it's going like that. And okay, so what's our time frame here? Where's this? This is the Depression. We'll say 1934. That was probably about the depth of it. This was around 1941. This is 1943. This is 1945. This is after the war, and that's probably not high enough. Our calc enrollment went nuts after the war. Men went to war. Okay? Men went to war. There were so few male students in 1943, it was 114, I think, that they decided, oh, we can't. Calc? No one's going to take it. We did not offer calculus 1943. We did not offer calculus 1944. When the returning GIs came back, male enrollment went up to something like 11 or 1,200 in a span of 2 or 3 years. I can't imagine what that did for planning. Lori, what do you think about that? How would that work for section management and things like that?
I'm absolutely sure that an excellent department head and associate.
Well, there we have the humor for today. This could not be sustained, and our enrollment dropped off significantly, and then into the 60s it grew, and well, okay. Well, all right, our lineage for calculus, I'm going to have to make this real quick because this gets pretty complicated. Basically, Calc 1 and Calc 2 were sophomore level courses. until 1960. From 1960 on, we had Calc 3 and Calc 4, which became differential equations, linear algebra. I think it's fair to say that the Calc 1 and Calc 2 taught prior to 1960 were probably a little more robust, rigorous than what we teach now. And I don't mean to say that we're watering things down now. They were sophomore level courses. You had people taking a full year of college algebra and analytic geometry. You could do more. And they did actually cover more topics than we typically cover in Calc 1 and Calc 2 today. They did quite a bit with differential equations, actually surprising amount with differential equations, including nth order linear differential equations in Calc 2. Did some partial differentiation. So, you know, there were topics that were covered that we don't do there now. Most of the topics that you'd see in these courses, you'd recognize them. If I gave you the course descriptions without numbers, you'd be able to pick them out, although there are some interesting things. Series, over the years, has been in all the calcs except the first. And epsilon delta proofs, oh, yes. Epsilon delta proofs, which for those of you not familiar with the beauty of what we call Calculus 1, those are formal, rigorous proofs of why limits exist and why things are continuous. Only hardcore math majors really like that stuff. Those have been in every calc class except the fourth. They actually had epsilon delta proofs in Calc 3 for a while, which I found surprising. Other courses. Okay, I'll keep this short. Solid geometry, we actually had such a course. I wish I'd have taken it. Didn't. It ended here in 1966. I don't know who created that course. Plane geometry, 1946, another outgrowth of World War II. That was created by Theodora Quick. You'll hear a little bit more about her later. Math 210, Math 211. Math for Elementary Ed started in 1964, created by either Paul Boonstra or John Campstra. Anybody here know John Campstra? Campstra taught here till 85, I believe. Boonstra, did you know Paul Boonstra? You worked with him, didn't you? Yeah. Paul Boonstra was at Calvin at the time, and he was into math ed, so one of those two created that course. Now the second one, Math 211, that was created by Mr. Jim Chesla in close association with Nikki Alexander, and you claim that she did most of the work, and that's what you would say. Computer mathematics, none other than Mr. Thomas Worthington. 1966. So that was, everyone sits at their own terminal, just types on a keyboard, right? What were they typing? What were they creating? Punch cards. Punch card computer work. It was great. You sent your punch cards in, you waited a couple days, they came back, and then you debugged. Survey of Calculus, Bob Engelman. Math 124, Dave Steinfurt. Math 138 was a group of 6. Math 127, Math 245, Mr. Song Lee created those. Discrete mathematics, I think it was almost the entire department. Math 215, statistics, that was Jennifer. Is Jennifer here?
And Son. And Paul.
And
Son. Son and Paul.
for 215? Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, well, thanks, I didn't know that. We had stats here prior to that. We had a psych stats and a business stats course, and those were started in the late 60s, early 70s, but the actual mathematical statistics course only came in 1997. And then I've run a history of math seminar, odd numbered years since 2005. That actually, the idea for doing that, I'd always had that idea, but the person who forced me into it was Alice Kikasan, one-time adjunct and one-time student here. How many math courses have we had? Well, from 1914 to 1915, we had 1. How many do we have now? 22. What's the total number? I really don't know. Because we have had courses over the years that were called math courses that really weren't. Kinematics and statics. Tom, Jerry, are those math classes? I would say no, and they eventually became engineering courses. Basic programming, medium to computer, Pascal programming, advanced basic programming. I think those were all in the math department because at that time we didn't have a computer applications department, so they had to go somewhere, and that's where they went. 1983, the computer applications department began, and those were no longer math courses. And then some oddball courses that are in the catalogs, but I never found them in the schedule books. I don't know what to make of them other than metrics in the home sounds really cool. It's like, wow, I can't wait to teach that. I started here full-time in 1987, and I remember asking Ray Bennett, I shared an office with Ray Bennett, asking him somewhat cautiously, so what's this Math 090 all about? Because I was afraid somebody was going to make me teach it. And I didn't really know how I was going to teach metrics in the home. And his answer was, I've never heard of it. What is that? I don't know who taught that. I never found it in, look, 10 years. I never found it in a schedule book once. I don't know about that. Math 092, Jim, you told me you thought maybe that had something to do with math for nursing?
One time I thought that.
Okay, and it may be true. You told me everything I know about it, which I just said. Okay. And then there was a follow-up. Math 210 used to be called Math 200. That was math for elementary teachers. We had one course. There was a Math 201 for 2 years. Supposedly the follow-up course had exactly the same name, Math for elementary teachers. It, for all I can tell, was never offered. It was never in a schedule book. So, you know, why am I saying we have between 45 and 54 courses? Those aren't math courses. Those aren't math courses. I don't even know if those existed. So we have had between 45 and 54 courses at the college. Any questions before we start? Yes?
Spherical trig?
I can do that right now. Math instructors. One of the math instructors you're going to see is when I put other courses, there's a lot of other courses I didn't mention, and that's because they're no longer with us. But Theodora Quick, the one who created, or Ted Quick, everyone called her Ted. She created the high school algebra course. She created the plane geometry course. And during the war, she was our only full-time math instructor at the college from 1943 to 1945. We had other people teaching courses then, but she was it. She was the full-time math department for 2 years. She taught everything we offered, except people filling in for stuff. And as part of the war effort, she created a course in spherical trig, navigation. It was truly was, we need you to support the war effort. We need you, the college, to support the war effort. And so she created a spherical trig course which lasted until a couple years after the war. It would have been a cool course. Has anyone in here ever had a course in spherical trig? That would be a great course to take and then to teach after I learned it. So yeah, that was there. Okay, math instructors. This seems like something else that ought to be something pretty easy to count. It isn't. Total number of full-time math faculty does not exceed 54. Total number of adjunct does exceed 99. That latter number, I don't think I'm ever going to know how many adjunct we have. Just give you an idea of catalogs not necessarily being very accurate. The first adjunct listed in the catalog was Ray Hoig. Ray taught over in applied technology. I didn't know he taught math for us. And there are other names that some of you may know, like Mary Ellen Rivers and Don Skierbeek, and let's see, Jim Chesla and Nancy Forrest. They are listed in the catalog as adjunct. I was an adjunct. So was Dave Pruce. We're not in any catalog ever as an adjunct. So if I'm just going to base my information on what's in the catalog, I'm never going to know how many adjunct we had. Now, I suppose I could go to HR and ask to see their database, and I don't think that's going to get very far, but I might be able to get some information from them. The reason why it's hard to determine how many full-time faculty we've got, oh, sorry, this is just quick conversation here. We've had 35 full-time math faculty. We've had 35 people who taught full-time, who were listed as mathematics instructors, and who essentially taught nothing but math. 35. 15 of them currently work for us, including myself, and I've known and met and talked to all but 3 of those 35. Okay. So that doesn't get you to 54. Well, there are 11 full-time instructors who taught quite a bit of math, but weren't listed as math people. They were listed as physicists or engineers, in one case even as counselors/psychology. If you look at the early years of the college, half of all the instructors who taught calculus, I'm sorry, even more than that, half of all the instructors who taught any kind of math, they were hired here to teach engineering. That was for about the first 50 years of this college. And then there are temporary full-time people who were hired to be temporary full-time, and then that was it. When it was over, they weren't hired here full-time. We have whatever gives us a total of 54. I forget the exact number. I can't do the math. That's the rest. So how many full-timers? Does not exceed 54. Now the very first full-time math instructor, Felix Wilcox. This is from the 1928 Olympian. That Olympian was dedicated to him. I don't know too much about him. He's one of the three I never met. Okay? He was born, I think, 1873, so it's been a while since he's been around. U of M grad. Started teaching at Central High School prior to 1900. He was our only math instructor for 6 years. So for 6 years, he was the math department. So he taught, I think, a total of 15 courses, and when he was the only one here, he was responsible for 11 different courses. So I imagine he had his hands full. Somebody I definitely would have wanted to meet, but a little bit before my time. Angeline Wilson. She was also a Central High instructor. This is from the 1937 Olympian, and it is again dedicated to a math instructor. That's a great statement. A great lady, simple, serene, sympathetic, and sincere. Somebody learned their alliteration. And again, I did not know her either. She, by all accounts, seemed to be a very caring, kind individual. Taught pretty much everything we offered because she had to. She was our second math instructor. Wilcox had his hands full. They hired her. You notice she was there from 20 to 22. What happened was in 22 is we hired a couple of engineers, and I think they basically took her teaching load from her. And so she went back to Central and taught till 29. And by then, we're about here then. We're here. Enrollment was way up, so she came back. And she left in 43, partly because we were here, but partly because at that point she was probably about 66 or 67 years old, had reached retirement age. As a tribute to her, in 1942, the Women's League created the Angeline Wilson Foundation, which was devoted to bringing in artistic talent for the entertainment of the college. That was its purpose. It funded the bringing in of artists, singers, musicians to entertain college students. That was in her name, Angeline Wilson Foundation, 1942. That disappeared in 1961. I have no idea what happened to it. I just don't know. It's not there anymore. And she was a musician herself. She was a vocalist, and from what I understand, from what I've been able to find out, she was quite good. She did actually perform in public as a vocalist. I can sing too, but not in public. Okay, this is the third person I have not met who was full-time math, and that's a shame because actually, I'm sorry, I didn't say that right. He wasn't full-time math. He was an engineer, but I wish I'd have met Mr. Shue. James Shue, Tom, I know you didn't know him because you started here too late. Dick Chestnut was actually hired to replace James Shue, but it didn't work out because Shue was teaching. Shue was hired to teach engineering. Dick Chestnut was hired to replace Shue. Dick Chestnut had never taught any engineering courses. Don't ask me how this happened, okay? But he had a degree in math, so basically what happened was Chestnut took over the calculus that Shue was teaching. And so Dick kept his job, and Herb DeVries, some of you know Herb DeVries, he was actually hired to replace James Shue, and that's how that worked out. This one you may not be able to read. This is another dedication to a math instructor, although math/engineering. He's listed in the catalog as engineering, but he is the one who taught calculus every year at this college that it was offered from 1927 to 1959. He taught calculus. So, you know, he may be an engineer to the engineering people, but to me, he's a math guy. I mean, look what he's got there. Look at that. It's a definite integral. Of course, it's got y dx in it, which to me is a pretty clear indication that he's doing an engineering problem, right? Yeah. That is a dedication from the 1947 Olympian. His thorough teaching, careful guidance, and considerate treatment of the student body have brought him the respect and admiration of engineering and business students alike. That business students part is interesting because I don't really find any evidence that he taught courses that business students would have wanted to take. In recognition of these prominent qualities of understanding and guidance, we dedicate this, the 1947 Olympian, to Mr. James W. Shue. Highly respected, very well liked, and in my mind, one of the greatest things I've happened across in my digging through yearbooks and catalogs and everything is this. That is from the 1948 Olympian, and the person on the left is artistic rendering of James Shue, the sage. I love that, and you look to the right and you see this young man right here. What is he holding? Come on. A slide rule. This was not the first page in the Olympian, but it was like the second or third. I think this is marvelous. This is marvelous. I love this. Okay. And this was drawn by a student. She was actually head of the art department, if you want to call it that, for the yearbook that year. And it's great. It's great stuff. But it's not as good as the next one. Shue was basically head of the engineering club, faculty advisor for the engineering club, from, mid-20s until he retired, close to 35 years. And the engineering club at this college used to be one of the biggest, most popular, and most influential clubs that we had. At one time, more than 10% of the student body was part of the engineering club. I kid you not. 10, 11, maybe even 12% of the student body was in the engineering club. And Shue was the advisor for that. And what you're now about to see is a real photo. We had football teams from early on until fairly recently, and there was homecoming parade. This is downtown Grand Rapids. This is fall of 1948, and this float won first prize. And I know this isn't really math department, but if you were going to be an engineer, you weren't going to be an engineer unless you took a lot of math, okay? And if you were going to do computations in your math class, and you know, you probably had to do it all by hand, but if you were ever going to use something to cheat a little bit, you'd use one of these. A 6-foot demonstration slide rule. If you want to see one of those, there's one in my office, not that one. But yeah, that's great. That is also from yearbook. That's something, you know. If we had homecoming today, we had floats, the math department would win every year. Right? But we need an engineer to help us build it. All right. This is a gentleman, I will be honest with you. When I first saw his name, what's the right word? I felt a little, it felt like he didn't quite belong even in the math department because, okay, he taught for us for 5 years and that's no great crime. But I found out that he was formerly the superintendent of public schools for Grand Rapids. And I'm thinking, okay, he was superintendent, he retired, he wanted something to do, wanted to make a little extra money, so yeah, you come and teach math for us for a few years and then you can retire. And I thought about that, and then I can't remember what it was that made me look more deeply into Mr. Greason, and this guy, it was amazing. He is one of the main reasons why we are here today. Now, you know, who's most significant behind the creation of the college? Well, Jesse Davis, principal of Central High and first president of JC, was extremely important. William Greason was superintendent of Grand Rapids Public Schools when we came into being. He had very close ties with the University of Michigan. He knew President James Angel while he was president of U of M. He knew him. He served on committees with him. They knew each other well. We patterned what we do after University of Michigan. Moreover, Greason spent 10 years in Chicago at Lewis Institute. Now, Lewis Institute is currently Illinois Institute of Technology. There are those who would claim, and I think justifiably, that Lewis Institute was the first junior college in the country. It was created in 1896. Who's he? What name do I want to use here? It was a brainchild of William Rainey Harper. You know the name Harper, Harper College in Illinois. William Rainey Harper was president of University of Chicago. He was the first president of the University of Chicago. And he got the idea that it would be great to create a high school at which students could do the first 2 years of college. And so in that sense, in 1896, when Lewis Institute opened its doors, that was the first junior college in the country. Now, William Greason fits into this picture because he went to Chicago in 1896 and became an instructor of mathematics there and dean of the faculty. So he was a mover and a shaker at the first junior college in the country. When he came back here in 1906, and there was discussion of, should we have a junior college in Grand Rapids, he was a prime mover and shaker in making that happen. He knew how to do it from what he'd done in Chicago. He was the superintendent of public schools here. So I had a much higher regard for the gentleman, but that's not the best part. Okay? When they opened the doors to Lewis Institute in 1896, the story, and it's a story, some of this is true, some I don't know. The story is that when they opened the doors that fine morning in 1896, there were two young boys, they called them. One of them was 12, I don't know about the other one, sitting on the curbside waiting to get into the doors. 12-year-old kids. And one of them was G.D. Birkhoff, George David Birkhoff. George David Birkhoff is generally considered to be the greatest mathematician in the United States in the first half of the 20th century. Went to Lewis Institute for 6 years, graduated in 1902, went to University of Chicago, went to Harvard, taught a few places, ended up on the faculty at Harvard for more than 30 years, and as I said, considered the preeminent mathematician in the US first half of the 20th century. He took math from Greason at Lewis Institute. He was a student. Here he is. This was not taken in 1902. It's a later picture, but this gentleman here, accomplished mathematician, actually took mathematics from someone who eventually taught for us, which I found fascinating. So Greason was quite a guy. And this is just, there's interesting things about people's lives. When he was born in 1853. Greason was born in 1853. So he's old enough, he was around when he could read about the Civil War on a daily basis, and he was around when Pearl Harbor was bombed. He was aware of both, which is, it's amazing, time does fly by, doesn't it? How are we doing on time here? Okay, I don't have much more to do, but this might be the last one. Theodore Quick, Ted Quick, another one you can't read. I don't know of her being honored by having a yearbook dedicated to her. It may have happened and I may have missed it. This says, by your sympathetic understanding and unceasing efforts to promote our interests, you have won the admiration and respect of all. With deepest gratitude, we, the sophomore class, express our appreciation to you, Miss Quick, for what you have done. She was sophomore advisor for many, many years, and in those days, that, among other things, meant she arranged commencement, took care of all those details. Ted, everyone called her Ted. Ted was born in 1896 in Lowell, or as she pronounced it, Lowell. I've spoken with her, I knew her. She tells me that her maternal grandmother was the first child of European descent born in what is now Colorado, which I found kind of interesting. She graduated from Central High School in 1914 and immediately went up to Sparta and taught in a one-room school at age 18. She then went to Michigan Normal School, Michigan State Normal School, which is now Eastern Michigan. Was there 2 years, graduated as valedictorian, got a teaching job in North Branch, Michigan at the high school. In fact, she got a teaching job. 1917 to 1920, she was there. She was principal at age 21. She was principal of North Branch High School. She then, I lost track a little bit of where she was. She got her master's degree from Columbia University in 26. She came back to Grand Rapids, taught at Central High School and South High School. And then in 1938, she came in here and replaced Felix Wilcox. Felix Wilcox was our first math instructor. She replaced him. And she pretty much taught everything. And she was the math department, as I mentioned, from 1943 to 1945. Taught pretty much everything we offered, created the courses I mentioned before. Retired in 1960, and I heard this from Dick Chestnut, and then I actually heard it from Ted herself, that she retired in 1960, but when she found out that there was going to be a brand new calculus course in 1960 to 1961, which wasn't going to have analytic geometry, you were going to have just calculus. Analytic geometry was separate, calculus was separate. She wanted to come back to teach it. So at age 65, she came back and taught for a full year the new Calc 1 and the new Calc 2, which I thought was really impressive. She was honored with the award of Emeritus Faculty in 1988. I was here in 1988. I'm sitting at commencement, alert, interested, focused, as we all are. Okay? And I'm looking at this, let's see, 1988, this 90, no wait, she was born in 96, 88-year-old woman. She was 88 years old. And am I doing, no, I'm not doing the math right. 88, 6, 92, sorry. Math's never been my strong subject. She was 92 years old, this older, somewhat frail, but very dignified woman come out on stage and was honored with Emeritus Faculty, and they read her name as Theodora Quick, and I thought, I know that name. I'd only been here a year. I know that name. And I got to thinking about it, and my grandmother, when she found out I was teaching here as an adjunct in 1980, she said, oh, junior college. Oh, yeah, junior college. You know, I had a good friend who I knew years back from North Branch, and she taught at the junior college, and I don't think she said, is she still there, because Ted would have been kind of old then. But then I thought, no, wait a minute. Yeah, I remember that now. My grandmother told me about Ted Quick. So a couple years passed, and I looked her up in the phone book. The phone books are these things that, you know, were books. You open them up, you look up phone numbers, okay? And I found her name in there, and she lived 6 blocks from me. I called her up. Could I come talk to you? Happy to talk to you. I walked over there. 2 or 3 times I visited with her, and an amazing woman, extraordinarily polite, kind. Long-term memory was really good. Short-term memory, not so good. At age 95, she was working a calculus problem a day. Okay? So I had the extreme pleasure of meeting her and talking with her, and I wish, I mean, this is a long time ago. I wasn't that interested in the history of this place now. I wish I'd talked to her for weeks, because she would have known so much. And then, if I'd have given this talk 6 months ago, you would not see the following picture, because I just found this. And okay, this is going to be on YouTube now. This is the first public viewing of this picture. Until now, half a dozen people have ever seen this. Ted Quick is in the back, in the center. What you see to the left of the gentleman is the entire faculty of North Branch Public Schools. North Branch is a dot on the map today. It was a smaller dot in 1917. The graduating class in 1920 consisted of a total of 7 students. Okay? So it was a small place. But Ted Quick is right there. And that's my grandfather. I found that up at the cottage this summer. I had no idea it existed. I will, since we're about out of time here, I will say this. If you know of any family photographs that you have in your possession or you know where they are and you can get a hold of them, you must take the time to document who's in them and who these people are before that memory is gone, because I'm the last person alive who would know who these people are. And I didn't even know this photo album existed until 6 months ago. So yeah, that's Ted with my grandfather. Yeah. I don't have time to give Alma her due. Alma was the second of the grand old ladies of the math department. That's what they called them. When Tom Van Wingen, last time, how many of you knew Tom Van Wingen? Tom Van Wingen kind of lives forever, you know. I, in a sense, replaced Van Wingen. Nobody ever replaced Van Wingen, but when he retired, I got a full-time job. Okay. Tom Van Wingen and Dick Chestnut both referred to Alma and Ted as the grand old ladies of the math department. They were almost the same age. Alma was a year older, and all I'm going to say here, I mean, you know, she has an interesting history, but the only thing I'm going to say right now is I was lucky enough to speak with her when she was 103 and 104. And frail, but again, her mind was there. It was there. And extraordinarily kind to talk with me many times. Well, 3 times, I believe. She was at Porter Hills. And one time I asked her, I said, Alma, you started teaching in the 20s. She's a founding member of the faculty of Ottawa Hills High School, 1925. And I said, you know, you taught during the Depression, you taught during World War II. Those were tough times, financially tough, politically tough. There's a war going on. How were students back then? I mean, come on, were they serious? Did they really, were they just really involved in their studies because they realized there's a depression going on, there's a war going on, I've really got to work hard? And she looked at me. I cannot even try to describe the look other than it was imbued with the wisdom of 100 years. She looked at me and she said, students are students. Some things have never changed. So, I'm over time. I guess that's all I got. If you have questions, let me know. You didn't ask me. Well, Robert asked one question. If you have any questions or anything else you want to know, I might have an answer. Otherwise, I could make something up. But thanks for coming. I appreciate it.